In the late summer of 480 BC, 7,000 Greeks stood in a pass barely wide enough for a wagon, marching toward them, the largest army the ancient world had ever seen. Modern historians count between 100 and 300,000 Persian soldiers. Herodotus claimed millions. The numbers said the Greeks should be dead by sundown. Instead, for 3 days, an empire of 50 nations broke itself against 300 Spartans and their allies, and the pass at Thermopylae became a graveyard for the immortals themselves. Everyone knows the legend: 300 Spartans, a last stand, glorious death. But that is the story poets tell. The truth, buried in Herodotus and Diodorus, is darker and stranger. Because for 2.5 days, the Greeks were not dying, the Persians were. The immortals, Xerxes' elite 10,000, were routed in front of their own king, twice. So the real question is not how the Spartans died. The real question is this: how did 300 men with 7,000 allies lure the most powerful empire on earth into a killing ground it could not escape? And why did it take the betrayal of a single Greek shepherd to undo what an entire army could not? To understand how a handful of Greeks pulled off the impossible, we must first understand the empire that came to swallow them. By 480 BC, the Achaemenid Empire under Xerxes I stretched from the Indus River to the sands of Libya. 50 subject nations, royal roads stitching 3 continents together, a treasury so deep it funded a war machine that took 4 years to assemble. Modern estimates put the invasion force between 150 and 300,000 fighting men, supported by a fleet of more than 1,200 warships. Against this, Greece. Not a country, not yet. A fractured patchwork of city-states that hated each other almost as much as they feared Persia. Athens, 10 years earlier, had humiliated Xerxes' father Darius at Marathon. Now the son had come to finish what the father started. The oracle at Delphi had already told Sparta a king must die to save the city. So when the call went out, one man volunteered: Leonidas, 60 years old, of the Agiad royal line, a soldier king who had trained in the Agoge since he was 7. He took with him 300 Spartiates, every one of them a father with a living son, so that no bloodline would end on that field. They marched north, knowing they would not march back. The battlefield was already chosen. Thermopylae, the hot gates, a coastal strip squeezed between sheer cliffs and the sea. In places 15 meters wide, a funnel, a bottleneck, the one place where Persia's numbers became Persia's curse. Because here, in the steam of the sulfur springs, with the Malian Gulf hissing to one side and Kallidromo rising on the other, only a few hundred men could fight at a time. The greatest army the world had ever seen was about to be fed, hand by hand, into a meat grinder built by geology itself. 2 men, 2 worlds, 2 definitions of power. Xerxes I, son of Darius, grandson of Cyrus the Great, he sat on a throne under a golden canopy and watched his armies cross continents. He had whipped the Hellespont when a storm broke his pontoon bridges, 300 lashes for the sea itself. He believed himself chosen by Ahura Mazda to rule the earth. When he arrived at Thermopylae, he sent a herald to the Greek camp with a single demand: lay down your weapons. Leonidas's reply has echoed for 2,500 years. Molon labe, come and take them. Xerxes waited 4 days. He could not believe so few men would actually fight. He expected them to flee in the night. They did not. Leonidas brought 300 Spartiates, but he did not stand alone. With him at the wall, 700 Thespians, 400 Thebans, 1,000 Phocians, men of Mycenae, Corinth, Tegea, Mantinea, Locris, and the Opuntians. In total, between 5,000 and 7,000 Greeks. The 300 are remembered. The other 6,700 are too often forgotten. They bled in the same dust. And then there were the Immortals, 10,000 of them. The Persian Royal Guard, so called because their number never dropped below 10,000. Every man who fell was replaced before sundown. They wore long embroidered robes, scale armor beneath, soft tiaras crowned with gold. They carried short spears with silver pomegranates on the butt spike, composite bows, and curved akinakes daggers. They had never lost a battle. They were about to lose 2 in a row in front of their god-king. The path to Thermopylae had begun 2 years earlier, in the workshops of Sardis. Xerxes ordered a bridge across the Hellespont, 674 ships lashed prow to stern with flax and papyrus cables. When his army crossed, it took 7 days and 7 nights without pause. They marched through Thrace, through Macedon, down into Thessaly, where the lords of Larissa bent the knee without a fight. By August, the Persian vanguard was descending into the Malian plain. The fleet shadowed them along the coast, 1,200 warships sliding south like a black tide. Then a storm hit Cape Sepias, 3 days of wind off the Magnesian shore. Herodotus says 400 Persian ships were dashed against the cliffs. The gods, the Greeks whispered, were already taking sides. Inland, the Spartans reached the pass first. Leonidas walked it end to end. He saw the choke point at the middle gate, narrow enough that a phalanx 8 men deep would span it shoulder to shoulder. He saw the crumbling old Phocian wall and ordered it rebuilt. And he saw something the Persians did not, a hidden goat track climbing up through the oak forests of Kelidromo, looping behind the pass, the Anopeia path. If the Persians ever found it, the trap closed on the trappers. So Leonidas sent 1,000 Phocian hoplites up the mountain to guard it. 1,000 men, on a path nobody was supposed to know existed. Hold on to that detail. On the morning of the 5th day after Xerxes arrived, he finally lost patience. The Greeks had not fled. So he gave the order. First wave, the Medes and the Scythians, 10,000 of them, light spears, wicker shields, conscripts from the Persian heartlands. They poured into the narrow gate, expecting to sweep the Greeks into the sea. What they hit was a bronze wall. The Spartan phalanx was 8 ranks deep. Each man's hoplon shield covered his own left and his neighbor's right. The dory, a 2.5-meter ash spear tipped with iron, punched out between the shields in a hedge of points. The first Persian line did not break the phalanx. The second line did not break it. The third was shoved forward by the fourth, and the fourth by the fifth, until men were dying not from spear thrusts, but from the weight of their own comrades pressing them onto the Greek bronze. Herodotus says the Spartans used a tactic he had never seen before, the feigned retreat. They would turn as if broken, draw the Persians forward in a screaming charge, then wheel and slaughter them in a heartbeat. The Medes died by the 1,000. Xerxes is said to have leapt from his throne 3 times in fear for his army. So on the second day, he sent in the Immortals, the 10,000, the royal guard, the men who had crushed Egypt, Babylon, and the Ionian revolt. They came in disciplined ranks, expecting to break what conscripts could not. They met the same wall. Their short spears could not reach past the longer Greek dory. Their wicker shields shattered under iron. Their scale armor could not stop a thrust driven by 200 pounds of phalanx pressure behind it. By the end of the second day, the Immortals had been hurled out of the pass twice. The pass was choked with their dead. The Greeks rotated their contingents and lost almost no one. And in his tent that night, Xerxes did something a Persian king was never supposed to do. He asked his advisors what to do next. That is when a man named Ephialtes was brought before him. He was a Malian, a local. Some sources say a shepherd, some say a disgraced soldier hoping for Persian gold. His name, Ephialtes, would become the Greek word for nightmare. He knew the mountain. He knew the goat track. the Anopeia path that Leonidas had tried to hide, and he told Xerxes everything. That night, the Immortals were given new orders. Hydarnes, their commander, led them up the path in darkness, 20,000 men by some accounts, guided by torchlight and a traitor's whisper. They climbed for hours through oak and pine. At dawn, they reached the summit, and the 1,000 Phocian hoplites guarding it, the men Leonidas had trusted with the back door of Greece, were not in formation. They were eating breakfast. They scrambled for their shields. The Immortals did not stop to fight them. They simply marched past, downhill, toward the rear of the pass. A runner reached Leonidas at first light. The trap had closed on the trappers. Leonidas now made the decision that made him a god in Greek memory. He called a council. He dismissed the allied contingents, the Corinthians, the Tegeans, the Mantineans, back to their cities. They would be needed for the war to come. He kept the 300 Spartans, the 700 Thespians who refused to leave, and 400 Thebans, whose loyalty Herodotus says was less voluntary. 1,400 men, against an army closing on them from both sides. They marched out from behind the Phocian wall, into the widest part of the pass, to kill as many Persians as possible before the noose closed. Herodotus's words are exact. They fought with their swords, those who still had swords, and with their hands and teeth, those who did not. Leonidas fell early, shot down in the open. The Spartans fought 4 times over his body to recover it. They drove the Persians back. They drove them back again. When their spears broke, they drew the Xiphos. When the Xiphos broke, they used their fists. They retreated to a small hillock at the rear of the pass. The Thebans surrendered. The Spartans and Thespians did not. And the Persians, having lost too many men trying to take them hand to hand, finally pulled back and buried them under a storm of arrows. Herodotus says the sky went dark. When it was over, 20 Persian noblemen lay dead in the pass. 2 of them were Xerxes' own brothers. By nightfall on the 3rd day, the pass was Persian. But the price had broken something inside Xerxes' army. The numbers, as far as the chroniclers can reconstruct them, 20,000 Persian dead. Some modern historians say less, some say more. Among them, 2 brothers of the king and the cream of the Immortals. Greek dead, about 1,400 at the final stand, with several thousand wounded and lost over the 3 days. Xerxes, in fury, did something no Persian king had done to an enemy of royal blood. He had Leonidas's body decapitated and crucified. It was a violation of Persian custom, and Herodotus says it was the act of a man who had been shamed in front of his own army. 3 weeks later, the Greek fleet, bought time by Leonidas's stand, destroyed the Persian navy at Salamis. The next summer, a coalition of Greek hoplites annihilated the Persian land army at Plataea. The invasion that was supposed to swallow Europe collapsed in 11 months. A stone was raised in the pass. On it, the poet Simonides carved one of the shortest and most famous epitaphs in human history. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. Ephialtes fled. A price was placed on his head by the Amphictyonic League. He was murdered years later, for reasons unrelated to his treason. His name became a curse. In modern Greek, it still means nightmare. And the tactic Leonidas used, the funnel, the bottleneck, the deliberate use of terrain to neutralize numerical superiority, became the most studied principle of asymmetric warfare in human history. For 2,500 years, Thermopylae has been studied in every war college that has ever existed. At West Point, at Sandhurst, at Frunze and St. Cyr, the lesson is always the same. Terrain is a multiplier. Discipline is a multiplier. And a small force, in the right ground, with the right will, can hold off an empire long enough to change history. The Finns used it against the Soviets at Suomussalmi in 1939. The Afghans used it against the British, the Soviets, and the Americans. In every insurgency of the modern age, somewhere on a planning map, an officer has pointed at a narrow valley and said, Thermopylae. 300 Spartans did not stop the Persian Empire. They slowed it down for 3 days, but those 3 days were enough. Enough for the fleet to gather at Salamis, enough for Athens to evacuate, enough for the idea of Greece, the idea of citizens fighting for laws, not for a king, to survive. Numbers do not win wars. Ground does. Will does. Time does. Thermopylae was not a victory. It was a warning carved in bronze and bone that numbers without terrain are meat, and meat against a phalanx becomes a grave. 1 year later, the Persians came back, and 10,000 Spartans, the avenging army Leonidas had died to make possible, met them at the place where the Persian Empire finally ended. That story is called the Battle of Plataea, when 10,000 Spartans exterminated 120,000 Persians. That's the next video. Anyways, I'm Epic Battle History, watching the past bleed into the present, and together we remember when time bled. I'll see you in the next battlefield.